Autonomic and somatic motor control. Somatic control is typically associated with the voluntary movement in the body. Therefore, somatic neurons control skeletal muscles, whereas autonomic control is typically associated with the involuntary movement of the body. Therefore, autonomic neurons control smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, glands, and some adipose tissue. In this presentation, we'll mainly focus on autonomic control. Under automatic control, there exist two divisions, parasympathetic and sympathetic. They're antagonistic to each other, meaning that when one is activated, it will be inhibitory to the other. The parasympathetic division is responsible for the rest and digest phase of the body. During this phase, the body conserves its energy by maintaining stable levels of cardiac output, lung activity, and oftentimes the pupils are constricted during this point. All this energy that is conserved by maintaining stable levels of these functions are then directed into functions like digestion. On the other hand, when the body receives a stressful or perilous stimulus, it activates the sympathetic portion of the body, which triggers the famous flight or fight response. Energy is no longer focused on digestion, but rather an increase in cardiac output, lung activity, and oftentimes the pupil are dilated during this function. So how do these responses happen? From the central nervous system, the signal projects to an autonomic preganglionic neuron, as shown. There, the preganglionic neuron synapses with the second neuron in the pathway, the postganglionic neuron. The parasympathetic and sympathetic pathways are similar in the fact that they both receive signals from the central nervous system, and they both have nicotinic receptors in the synapse between the post and preganglionic neurons, which both accept acetylcholine, but that's where their similarities end. At the end of the postganglionic neuron, there are different neurotransmitters and receptors for either the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways. For the sympathetic pathway, there is norepinephrine, which binds to the adrenergic receptor, whereas the parasympathetic pathways, there is acetylcholine that binds to the muscarinic receptor. There is also one final difference. Sympathetic pathways typically have short preganglionic neurons and long postganglionic neurons. In this chart, it shows a small summary of the similarities and difference between the parasympathetic and sympathetic pathways. I wasn't able to cover everything in Chapter 11, but these are the main points, and this is a great chart that is a great summary for Chapter 11 in general. Thank you for listening.
All right, so this is a review of Chapter 13, which is all about reflexes. So the first type of reflex is autonomic reflexes. These are all polysynaptic, which means there's a receptor that sends information to the sensory neuron, which then goes to the central nervous system. And then there's an inner neuron there that then connects to the pre and postganglionic autonomic neurons, which then send that information to the target cell. And so this is those visceral reflexes. And then, so the other type of reflexes is these can be monosynaptic or polysynaptic. The first proprioceptor that connects to reflexes is the muscle spindle, which these are buried within the muscles of the fibers of the muscle. And then there's the Golgi tendon organ as well, which is sort of this connection between the muscle fibers and the collagen fibers, which then connect to the tendon. And so the Golgi tendon organ detects tension, and the muscle spindle detects length. So that's sort of the difference between the two. The first one is this knee-jerk reflex, which is a monosynaptic reflex, and this is information being collected by the muscle spindle, which then sends information through a sensory neuron to the spinal cord. And you can see this one's monosynaptic because then it just binds straight onto that quadriceps, that motor neuron that binds to the quadriceps muscle. So the quadriceps muscle contracts when you sort of hit right below the knee, and then it also sends information to the hamstring muscle, allowing it to relax so that the knee can totally contract. And then the second one is this flexion reflex and the cross extension reflex, which sort of work together. And so there's a nociceptor, a pain receptor that detects this painful stimulus. And so your leg needs to move out of the way, right? And so it sends information to the spinal cord, which then sends information via alpha motor neurons that extend those muscles and then contract those muscles so that it can move the foot away from that painful stimulus. But then it also has to go the other side to provide support when you are lifting up that right leg. It has to support that left leg better. And so the extensors contract there and the flexors are inhibited in order to support the leg as it's being taken away from that painful stimulus. So those are the basic reflexes that we were talking about in this class.